So welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to see the turnout. It's always a great pleasure for us to do these public lectures because it's kind of like the cherry on the cake. We have the cake by coming to school here or being part of the community, the larger part of RYI community. And then we get the cherry on top, getting some scholars to come and talk about their own research. And today we have Heather Moody, who is also teaching here a course on Introduction to Tibetan Buddhism from an anthropological point of view. We're happy that she's here because in some way she's representing a very rare case of a scholar practitioner where she's studied 9 years in Namdroling. So we could call her a Kenmo, but not quite because of other reasons. And then she stayed on and taught 7 years at that institute. And on top of that, she has the academic background. So she's bringing traditional and academia together. So she had an MA, MTS from Harvard Divinity School, and is now completing her PhD at the University of Virginia. So please welcome her with me.
So first of all, I would like to thank the Lamas, the Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas for their blessing of giving us the teachings and the protection that they provide. Then thank you, Dian, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to everybody here at the Rangjung Yeshe Institute for making not just this talk possible, but a really phenomenal education opportunity possible and having done so for so many years. So as Dian said, I'm a PhD student at the University of Virginia. I'm only in my 5th year. So that means I'm just starting the research phase of my program, which means I have not yet written my thesis, but I'm working on translating the 2 texts, which I'll be talking about today. So my talk explores the complex tradition within Tibetan Buddhism of the terma or treasure tradition. Now, the word terma refers to texts and objects usually believed to have been hidden during the Tibetan Imperial Era, which is the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries, and then later revealed by treasure discoverers. Specifically in my project, I'm focusing on a unique and understudied genre of Tibetan literature, which is the treasure accounts or treasure origin accounts. So these are works written by individuals who are treasure revealers. And so they're partially autobiographical. It talks about the accounts of how they have located and brought forth certain treasures, but it's also theoretical, that both of the authors I'll talk about today take on the issue of what is the nature of the treasures. And I think what some of them have to say will actually surprise you. So my research focuses on 2 pivotal figures in this tradition: Guru Chokyi or Guru Chokyi Wangchuk in the 13th century, and Ratna Lingpa in the 15th century. And each of them has written a terjung or treasure origin account. And these represent some of the earliest, most systematic attempts to theorize the nature of treasure revelation. Now, in my overall project as a doctoral project, rather than just my talk today, I'm focusing on a few specific questions. What did the treasure tradition look like in Tibet between the 13th and 15th centuries? Because that's about 200 years after the inception of the treasure tradition in the 11th century. And so how does it grow to maturity? And then how does it look between the period from Guru Chokyi's work to Ratna Lingpa's work? Then the second question is, How do the treasure revealers themselves understand and describe their role in producing texts while disclaiming authorship? Then finally, the final question that I'll be focusing on is how does analysis of these treasure origin accounts contribute to broader debates about legitimacy, revelation, and lineage in Tibetan Buddhism? So let's talk a little bit about what the claims are, the historical claims of the treasure tradition, to get some context before we look at the treasure revealers I'm talking about. And for some of you, this may be unsurprising, but nonetheless, we need to build the scene. So the tradition usually, and keep in mind that I say usually because we'll see why later on, usually says that these objects and texts called treasures were concealed during the Imperial Era, particularly during the reign of King Tisong Detsen, right? So that's in the 8th century. And as some of you may already know, this was a golden age of Buddhist transmission. The first monks were ordained, the translators were trained, and there was a great deal of interaction with Indian masters, the most famous of whom, of course, is Padmasambhava, also known to Tibetans as Guru Rinpoche. And so Padmasambhava and his spiritual partner, Yeshe Tsogyal, are credited for hiding teachings all over Tibet to be revealed later. And this is the very standard description of the Tibetan treasure tradition. Now, as we know, not long after the reign of King Tisong Detsen, around the year 877, the Tibetan Empire fell into fragmentation and decline. Now, the way that different scholars describe this decline, it can be more or less pessimistic. At the very least, there was a loss of centralized Buddhist authority and state-sponsored monasticism. Although some later commentators will treat it as though even the Dharma was lost. So whether or not the Dharma is lost is certainly a concern coming into the 11th century. So there's a resurgence in the 11th century following the rise to power of one King Yeshe, who was able to bring a few different kingdoms together, certainly not overarching power. He was no kind of emperor like Tisong Detsen was. And the later translation schools, or the Sarma, find their roots around this time with Tibetans who went to India, brought texts back, translated them, and then new lineages were founded upon them. So, for example, Marpa was one such translator who his work then builds the dynasty, which becomes the Kagyu school of Buddhism in Tibet. And so likewise with the Kadampas and the Sakyapas around this time. So also around this time, the turn of the millennium, there was this question of the authenticity of the older teachings. Particularly starting from Yeshe and then carried right through with the new translation schools, some of the scholars considered the pre-existing scriptures, those which describe their lineage as coming from the Imperial Era, as possibly not being authentic scriptures. And one thing that they asked for is that, well, if these tantras are authentic, please show us the Sanskrit versions of the tantras. And at this point, the Nyingmapa school, the school which maintained this older lineage, they considered their works valid. But nonetheless, it's around this time that the treasure tradition starts to emerge. So there does seem to be an element of influence there, that the idea of authenticity and the nature of lineage are kind of in question. Okay? So instead of sending their own translators to India to bring back new teachings, as their fellows were doing, the Nyingma reveal that not only do they hold the authentic teachings uninterrupted from the time of King Tizong Detsen, at which point those teachings were brought or had been brought from India, but also that there's a second short lineage called Terma, in which the blessings and the lineage are transmitted in sort of a leap over from the past to the future, and that this too constitutes a valid type of lineage. So now, as to the treasure revealers and where they draw their from whence do they draw these hidden teachings? We won't see. We will see the role of the physical landscape, that they pull forth teachings from caves. We'll see caves, temples, lakes, the sky, and of course, in later times, also directly from their own mind. I'm trying to reference the Gongter tradition without promising to talk about the Gongter tradition, because that's kind of beyond my time, my bracket of time. So before we discuss kind of the people in specific who I'm talking about, I don't know why it's so hard today. I need to calm down. Sorry. I'm a little bit nervous. All right. So before we jump into talking about Guru Chokyi and Ratna Lingpa and read some excerpts of their writing, let's talk about one of the large framing issues of the treasure origin accounts. Because these are the texts in which, in our case, Guru Chokyi and Ratna Lingpa explain step by step each of the treasures that they brought forth. And they start with how they found the treasure key, also known as an inventory, and then how they find, which helps them find the treasure location. And then they engage with the treasure location. And as you'll see with the excerpt I read you from Guru Chokyi, then there's from that point there then kind of unfolds a revelatory process in connection with usually bringing forth some physical objects. And then they also talk about which teachings were within that treasure cycle, and they talk about the benefits of those teachings. And in some cases, we'll see that treasure revealers will also take note of which parts of the teachings were in the cycle, but which they decided not to bring forth. So it's very varied and interesting. But what we want to look at here is authorship. So we have Guru Chokyi, Ratna Lingpa, and definitely some other treasure revealers who have written accounts of treasure revelation. And think about what is the point of writing a treasure origin account? What is the point of explaining how something was found within a cave or buried or in all these different circumstances in which a treasure might be found? It's a proof. They're offering a proof of how they did not create it themselves, right? They did not sit down one day and think, I'm going to write a new Dharma practice or a new prophecy or whatnot. So the treasure revealers are going through great lengths to locate what they've discovered as separate from their own academic work or philosophical work or whatnot. However, if we think about what the treasure revealers do, they are this, in Tibetan we would say, that without this, you cannot have, right? Without the treasure revealers, then these treasure texts would not be brought into use, would not be disseminated. And for those of us who are listening to this, who are practitioners, a great deal of the texts we practice actually are treasure texts. And so these had to come from somewhere. So the treasure revealers are obviously deeply complicit in the production of the texts, right? In the case of Guru Chokyi, he tells us how he sits for 4 days and 4 nights in the cave transcribing the text before then taking the text and hiding it back. So in the English or the Western academic study of treasures, we've often been referring to the treasure as belonging to the treasure revealer. Yes, we say, oh, well, these are Chokyi Lingpa's treasures. These are Ratna Lingpa's treasures. These are Longchenpa's treasures, right? And this is at odds with what the treasure revealers themselves are saying about what they do. They're thinking, this is not mine, I found it, right? And this isn't to say that they lack creativity, right? These Guru Chokyi and Ratna Lingpa both wrote autobiographies, they write poetry, they write songs, they write histories. So they are capable of writing their own autonomous work. And yet, when it comes to the treasures, they're saying, no, here's a step-by-step detailed account of why I did not write this. Yeah. So one of the larger arguments I hope to be making in my project is to kind of approach how we should perhaps talk about the treasures in a way that recognizes this disclaiming of authorship. Yeah. So what I'm up against with that is our modern Western idea of authorship. So in the 18th century, the 18th century copyright law is very much kind of complicit in our formulation, our idea of authorship. What was going on at that time? The rise of the mass production of written works. Yes? And so written work, instead of being kind of sponsored, because usually if you were a poet, you had your sponsor who admired your brilliant brain, and they might support your lifestyle, and then you write your poem. It's a little bit different. But here, texts can now be mass produced, and written work becomes a commodity which can be owned, sold, and controlled. So the issue of who is the person who can own it and can sell it becomes an issue of financial interest. Another issue which may have played into our modern idea of authorship is the idea of the author as a solitary genius, right? Coming from the Romance period of literature. The solitary genius whose intellectual work is an expression of their internal vision. So for me, when I think about this kind of description of modern authorship, yeah, that does sound accurate. As an academic, we're certainly concerned with publishing and citation, attribution, right? We want to be very clear that we are known for the works that we have composed. In Dharma terms, it seems that at this point in the 18th century, written work becomes considered an extension of self. The author's self extends into their literary work. And as anything which falls within the domains of me and mine, it demands protection and recognition. So this is one issue I want to go more into in my research, is how it's not a simple thing to take our modern idea of authorship and then transpose that into the 13th or 15th century. Yeah. So now let's turn to first a little description of my two case studies, Guru Chokyi and Ratna Lingpa, and then after that we'll go to some excerpts. So Guru Chokyi was born in 1212 and died in 1270 of the Common Era. So he's one of the earliest systematizers of the treasure tradition. The text he wrote is the Great Treasure Origin Account, Terjung Chenmu, and it provides the first, or one of the first, in-depth, reflexive accounts of how the treasures should be discovered, interpreted, and transmitted. His work categorizes different types of treasures, outlines ethical and ritual requirements for treasure revealers, and even responds to the criticisms that he must have experienced from the followers of the new schools at his time. In particular, one of his great contributions is his focus on the sacred landscape of Tibet. He describes how treasures are hidden within the natural environment and must be extracted carefully with proper ritual observances to appease the spirits who guard them. So this points to something which I think is an understudied aspect of the treasure tradition. Since we've been in academia treating the treasures as the academic property of the treasure revealers, is that by understanding the origin accounts and seeing the details that he brings into describing the very process of pursuing and bringing forth treasure, and as we will see, how the environment reacts to the treasure revealer and how sometimes those reactions can be terrifying. This highlights for me this really understudied aspect of the living world, that we don't have a dead material world around us. At least the treasure revealers don't. They have a world which is alive, with which, if they're going to, as we'll see, for example, Guru Chokyi the first treasure that he reveals has actually been known to several generations before him. They've known there was a treasure in that place, but they were unable to bring it forth. So that kind of detail brings forth the the community and the elements of the environment which are complicit and intertwined in the existence of a given treasure, right? And it also discounts claims like perhaps that Guru Chokyi just decided to make this stuff up for his own benefit. So I'm going to introduce Ratna Lingpa next, and we'll return to Guru Chokyi's work. So Ratna Lingpa, who was born 1403 and died of 1478, so he's writing about 2 centuries later, directly expands upon Guru Chokyi's ideas. Ratna Lingpa's text is called The Lamp Which Illuminates Treasure Origins, and that's Terjung Salwedunme. So Ratna Lingpa, there are a lot of connections between Ratna Lingpa and Guru Chokyi, which are super interesting to think about. They both live, although 2 centuries apart, in Lodok, Tibet. Yeah. So when they're talking about aspects of the physical landscape, they are talking about the same landscape. Ratna Lingpa, being too early for copyright law, borrows and quotes extensively from Guru Chokyi's work. Yeah. And part of my job as I compare these 2 texts will be to see in which points does he diverge. Yeah. He's also understands himself to be the reincarnation of one of Guru Chokyi's relatives. So there's all these different ties between these two treasure revealers. So Ratna Lingpa, while Guru Chokyi's kind of categorization of the treasures has to do with different types and the protocol of extracting them and so on, Ratna Lingpa makes a claim that Guru Chokyi only hints at. He says that all of the Buddha's teachings, both sutras and tantras, earlier and later, without exception, are treasures, insofar as they were hidden and later revealed. So what he does when he says that is he's actually effectively collapsing the distinction between kama and terma. Right? He's saying that whether something is a treasure that's revealed today, or the kama teachings being the long lineage from Bimalamitra and Guru Rinpoche up to his present time, both of them, insofar as they are something which was concealed and later revealed, count as terma. So this is a very interesting move. And he's going to make a lot of He's going to make some big steps. And to kind of understand why he would say something like this is very interesting. Why would he say that all Dharma is Terma? Ratna Lingpa comes from a far more a time. Ratna Lingpa is an interesting person. He's very confident. He's very very powerful socially, and he's very aware of the critiques that have sprung up after the time of Guru Chokyi, but before his time. So we can see part of his work to establish all Dharma as treasure is specifically responding to something that happened between my two individuals, which is when Bhutan Rinpoche asserted the Kangyur and Tengyur, but asserted them in such a way that cut out the Nyingmapa Tantras, right? So I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't have my notes on that. But Ratna Lingpa is definitely tuned in and spends a lot more time responding to detractors. Okay. So in terms of, let's see. The Ratna Lingpa, he engages with the issue of textual legitimacy in a number of ways. He compiles extensive lists of the tantras known to him and argues that they were concealed and then revealed, framing treasure revelation as a form of continuous scriptural renewal rather than a secondary practice. And these lists are actually interesting for another reason. So let me briefly tell you why. Ratna Lingpa is, as some of you may know, credited with the original lists of texts for the Nyingma Gyudbum, right? So as a response, again, to the Kangyur being itemized in such a way as to ignore the Nyingma Tantras, Ratna Lingpa undertakes to categorize and list the Nyingma Tantras. We don't have that list. That list is not obvious to us. Nobody's discovered it or written a paper on it, but he's the one to whom it is ascribed, that original list. It's only a couple centuries later, in the time of Jigme Lingpa, who does tremendous work to write an itemization, that we have an idea of what the Nyingma Gyudbum contains. But we don't know which of Jigme Lingpa's texts are also the texts that, I mean, of course, most of them must be, but we don't know what differences there might be between Ratna Lingpa's list, which no longer exists, and Jigme Lingpa's list, which we can all read. So these lists that Ratna Lingpa makes is kind of where I first came to this project. That within his Terjung Salwe Dönme, within this text, he goes through great lengths to itemize very long lists of the Mahayoga, Anuyoga, Ati-yoga tantras, the outer tantras as well. And though I feel like it's actually beyond the scope of my project, a comparison of that, and if we could tie that to later iterations of the Nyingma Gyudbum, that might kind of form into some very interesting research. Some research that would be of great interest to the Nyingma school in general. In my project, however, so that's I feel like that's outside of my scope. I'm a bit nervous about taking on the Nyingma Gyudbum, possibly because in Tibetan it says 100,000. So it's the 100,000 tantras of the Nyingmas, which is a way of saying a lot. But so it seems too much for me. So my project, my doctoral project, I hope will become a comparative analysis of these two figures and reveal some kind of treasure theory, which may or may not develop and change. I suspect it will between the 13th and 15th century. Because while Guru Chokyi is codifying the treasure tradition, Ratna Lingpa is making this much grander metaphysical claim that all Buddhist teachings arise according to the treasure model. So first, I have two excerpts for you, and they're fairly lengthy. So first, I'd like to turn to Ratna Lingpa, and this is the very beginning of his text. So he's going to explain how all Dharma taught by the three Buddhakayas is none other than treasure. And what I'll read is his description of the Dharmakaya as a treasure. So as I read, pay attention to the words like hidden, concealed, and revealed, manifest, entrusted, and you'll be able to get a sense of what he's trying to say, of the treasure-like nature of the Dharmakaya teachings. The Dharma does not drift, it does not change. The heart of the revealer, Samantabhadra, remains unsullied, beyond conceptual grasping, yet ever present in the unfolding of enlightened activity. And yet, this wisdom does not remain hidden. From within the infinite treasury of the enlightened expanse, it manifests, appearing in the world, yet untouched by the world. It is neither inside nor outside, neither before nor after. From within the profound concealment of the precious hidden reality, the teacher naturally arises not as an individual, but as a mirror reflecting the capacity of each being. To those who possess the clarity to perceive, the pinnacle of all vehicles is revealed, offering the ultimate meaning, the great perfection, the most profound and direct path to awakening. This supreme teaching is distilled into the sacred syllables, Maha, Anu, Ati. The essence of the revealed treasure, a radiant gem of wisdom, emerging in this world for the benefit of those prepared to receive it. Thus, wisdom is never lost, only concealed, within the vast mind of the awakened. It is safeguarded within the enlightened heart of the awareness holders, entrusted as a transmission that spans across time, appearing when the moment is ripe. Such is the way of the terma, the treasures. They emerge not as relics of the past, but as the living pulse of the awakened mind, ensuring that the truth remains ever fresh, ever relevant, and ever present for those who seek it. So that's the end of that excerpt. So Ratna Lingpa is quite a fantastic writer and really a delight to read. He goes on to talk about, this was just the Dharmakaya, how the Sambhogakaya, the Nirmanakaya, and furthermore, all the Dharma teachings of India and Tibet. So the Buddha's own teachings and also all the commentators that we know and study here, as well as all the Dharma teachings of Tibet, are treasure. And he makes clear to us a couple of points which actually push back against our general expectations of what a treasure is. Because he shows us that not all treasures are connected with Padmasambhava, obviously. Now, in terms of the vast definition of every single Dharma being treasure, then there's no mention of Padmasambhava of having gone to India to hide things at the time of the historical Buddha, right? But even more specifically within Tibet, he tells us not all treasures are related to Padmasambhava. How? He mentions King Songtsen Gampo. So King Songtsen Gampo is, I want to say, 7th century. He is before Chisong Detsen, before Guru Padmasambhava came to Tibet. So here's what Ratna Lingpa tells us. King Songtsen Gampo, inspired by this divine manifestation, sanctified the very land upon which Lhasa stands, embedding it in the fivefold cycle of hidden treasures. And he lists these. The first, outer decrees, historical proclamations, and governance scriptures. Inner instructions, esoteric teachings and sacred mantras. Secret oral transmissions, wisdom passed through the whispered lineage. Prophetic royal commands, foreseeing the trajectory of Tibet's spiritual future. And treasuries of protection, safeguarding both worldly and spiritual welfare. These sacred decrees, inscribed on blue silk adorned with golden script, were sealed and concealed beneath the great pillar of the Jokang Temple, Here they awaited their destined discovery when the karmic conditions of the world would call them forth once more. So this is very cool for those who are attached to a specific description of the treasure tradition, having originated from Padmasambhava. Ratna Lingpa, although of course he definitely reveres Padmasambhava, is casting a definition of terma that's far vaster than that. Also, another surprise, not all treasure revealers are Nyingmapas. So he mentions that Rechungpa, who is one of Milarepa's main disciples, was a treasure revealer. Here's what he says. It was at a time of great spiritual transformation that the esteemed master, Jitsun Rechungpa, concealed these sacred instructions within the hidden sanctuaries of Lodak Karchu. Knowing the future needs of beings, he entrusted these profound teachings, awaiting a destined moment for their revelation. Centuries later, it was the pure-hearted master, Tsangpa Gyare, who discovered this concealed dharma, bringing it forth in a time when the world was in need of profound guidance. So I don't have the excerpt here, but he also mentions Sakyapa, treasure revealer. So he's making a point that treasure, not only is treasure valid, all dharma is treasure, and that this specifically Tibetan practice of revealing texts or objects from the past is not only a Nyingmapa practice, but is common across the other traditions as well, if not as commonly known. Okay. So now let's turn to Guru Chokyi Wangchuk. So this is the earlier work now. And this translation is very rough. And so I pray that the Dharma protectors will grant me their patience, that if I'm sharing a translation which is not very accurate today, that they'll be patient with me until such time as I can produce a better translation. So, yeah. So the first part of this excerpt of Guru Chokyi is part of the actual treasure revelation process. So as I alluded to earlier, this has multiple stages. The first stage is the treasure inventory. Yeah. And what I actually like to call it the treasure key. So how does he acquire this treasure key? This key is going to lead him to the treasure site. And may contain a description. In this case, it does contain a description of the treasure. In this case, okay, let's see. So kind of a mysterious wandering passerby who he says is somebody not known to me, but clearly of noble lineage, stops and they talk together, and he starts to beg Guru Chokyi, please take my possessions, take this reliquary, or like a gao. You'll see during Losar, maybe you saw the Tibetan ladies wearing the big reliquaries. So I'm imagining something like that. Take my texts, take my drum, because what's inside the reliquary is very precious to me, and I know that if I give it to you, I'm going to die. But you shouldn't worry about that because it's going to be of tremendous worth to you. So interesting. So he receives this gao and he's excited about it. He takes it home to his father. His father's not super thrilled that Guru Chokyi has come home with this thing. He takes the scroll from within the gao and he kind of bunks him on the head with it. And he says, I'm actually very familiar with this document. And so then first his father recounts this story of how when he was young and when he was serving his own master, they encountered this treasure. They followed this the treasure key. They found the sites and tried to bring forth the treasure. Then there was an earthquake or like a rock slide. And although the treasure door opened slightly, the yogi who was trying to remove it was killed. And they actually ended up putting the yogi's body into the treasure cave, which was a surprise to me. And so this terrified them. The party split up. They didn't want to try to approach the treasure. But 3 years later, another group tried, and they approached the location, tried to approach the treasure because they know where it is. And it's like a sealed cave. But this time, when they tried to open the treasure, the sky turns red, and there's a wind with very sharp hail comes at them. And this hail kills both the headman of the region, so the guy in charge, and the sponsor of the activity. So this disturbed everybody, and nobody wanted to try to approach that treasure anymore. They deemed that the protector deities had become enraged. And so Guru Chowang's father relates this, that although he knew where the treasure was, he didn't dare try to approach it. But because of the tremendous signs that were connected with signs being apparently a couple of deaths, he was certain that the treasure was genuine. So now Guru Chowang has come home with the treasure key, and for a while his father forces him to just put it away, put it in their dharma room underneath the what's it called, Jugji, the throne, and leave it alone. But eventually Guru Chowang is able to obtain that and go forth on this process. So I'm skipping over a lot because this is very lengthy, and I don't feel like I fully pulled together the entire account. But I have two different excerpts of visions that he has during this process. First, of extracting the treasure from the inner sanctum of the cave, and then the second is when he's trying to transcribe the treasure for 4 days and 4 nights. So he's able to enter the treasure cave and finds treasure scrolls. And shortly thereafter, he has a vision. And in this vision, he seems to be having a conversation with the guardian of the treasure. So a spirit who considers it his own responsibility for keeping the treasure safe. And then we'll see what that becomes. Then in the second excerpt, it's more about him conquering his own fears. So here's the first. He says, "In that vision, I stood upon a long bridge leading to a grand mansion, its gate made of iron, sealed. Before it there stood a dark figure with tangled hair, riding an ox with one horn. I asked him, 'What are you doing here?' He looked at me sharply, pulled back his hair, touched the iron gate, and said, 'This belonged to your ancestors, and now it falls to you. No matter what you do, it will remain like an obstacle. Yet I shall stand watch, for what lies within is a tool which can neither be used nor discarded. So to you I entrust its keeping. You must seek it out yourself.' And then this stranger mounts his ox and rides westward toward the horizon." Guru Chowang says, "I pondered whether or not to open the gate. As I hesitated, an old woman approached. She was wearing a large key around her neck. She said, 'With this skillful means, the gate shall open. Within lies the boundless treasury, a sea of milk, teeming with fish, and all sustenance fulfilled.' Thus saying, she inserted the key, and the gate swung open." And he stands there, he says, for a moment, kind of realizing the Dakini's secret, boundless meaning. And then he enters the mansion. Within the mansion, a great bird emerged, resembling something like a vulture or Garuda. It soared, and from its mouth, 5-colored flames burst forth. He says, "My body, bound by discipline, remained speechless, yet my mind felt illuminated by vast compassion. I mounted the great bird and soared into the sky, beyond successive layers of rainbow clouds. There in the expanse above, I beheld a palace of radiant light, in which sat a being in the posture of the Vajra warrior. This being held a vessel filled with ambrosia, which it poured over my crown. As the nectar descended, it transformed my body clear into a clear crystal, transparent inside and out. At my heart, there appeared a single white syllable, suspended as an immaculate seed of light. The white radiance shone forth, and from the being's left eye, and within the space before me, there appeared this syllable. Then my form, body, and mind merged into the single expanse. The white syllable merged into my heart merged into my eye, and my eye merged into the vision, and the vision dissolved into light. This syllable of purest white dissolved into my heart. I experienced the state beyond grasping, a spontaneous liberation, a vast and open realization. So this is seems like it starts in a kind of unsettling way, because the guardian at the gate of the mansion isn't friendly. Right? He's kind of definitely not friendly, maybe a little bit spooky. Having read the larger story, there's a fluctuation that happens between really sublime moments like this vision of this deity in white, giving him an empowerment with the amrita, with the ambrosia, and then very, very spooky moments of doubt and despair. So we might think that everything's going to be onward and upward from this first moment, but actually, what happens after the point I've stopped in the excerpt is he becomes the deity. He starts offering the ambrosia, and then a female figure comes to him and says, "Don't do that." and so what is sort of fantastic and very inspiring is also kind of undone abruptly, and the scene changes. So now the second excerpt I'm going to give you is kind of one of these more spooky or ominous visions. And this one is actually not entirely clear to me how much of it is a vision and how much of it is actually happening, as you'll see. But this is during the time that he spent 4 nights and 4 days in the cave transcribing the scrolls. The herdsman, known as Dungchung, carried a vibrant prayer, and a woman lay ill nearby. We ourselves, hot from the setting sun, had fallen into an uneasy sleep. But the shrine and the herdsman both remained restless, unable to slumber. Outside, the door creaked, sharp and piercing. The roof beams trembled. Above, on the ridge, a yak stood silhouetted, its horns ablaze, flames dancing wildly, scattering sparks into the darkness. From the temple, there was the echo of the sound of clashing iron weapons, ringing as if they were newly forged. My 2 assistants, overwhelmed, cried out in unison, their voices sharp and shrill, fading into the shadowy air. I tried to visualize my Yidam, Vajrapani, but it was just a phantom. I tried to meditate, to call forth the deity, but my mind felt foggy. My half-open eyes saw nothing. My vision blurred and was vacant. I thought, is this the fulfillment of prophecy, or merely my own illusion? My father's words echoed. You must reveal the hidden treasure, or all will ripen into decay. A thought of hopelessness crossed my mind. I remembered an old resolve, a promise I had made long ago, to accept all burdens, even those of the spirits and demons, for they are without blame. They never harmed me. It was I who accepted, I who took on every curse. Thus, I thought, I must carry this without anger or resentment, for whatever brings joy, I shall embrace no matter the cost. My father's words repeated in my mind, whatever comes, let it come. With that, I sank to the ground, laying my head low. In the stillness, I heard only the faint hum, a lingering echo, and when I looked up, nothing was there, only the hollow sound of my own breath. So what I see in this second excerpt is, first of all, that the Guru Rinpoche has doubt. Not Guru Rinpoche, I'm sorry. Guru Chowang experiences doubt and fear at times, even though he's kind of he's already brought forth the treasure. Some of this ominousness and unease that he feels is very interesting, and the doubt that he experiences. So I love that he recounts what his father told him: whatever it comes, let it come, which I would say we might call a form of radical acceptance. So in the case of Guru Chowang, these two kind of excerpts I've given you don't easily fit together, and indeed they're part of a larger puzzle that I'm still working to accurately put together. It's sometimes very hard to tell what is dream and what is awake, what is waking. And this also kind of points to the necessity in terms of the academic study of visionary accounts to consider that we need to find a vocabulary for the different states of mind that a master, a practitioner might have, in which the barrier or the kind of the dividing line between dream and so-called reality and the appearances is very thin. So a few words of conclusion, and then we can take some questions. In conclusion, I'm arguing that the Tibetan treasure tradition is more than a religious phenomena. It's a sophisticated intellectual and literary tradition that grapples with the issues of history, legitimacy, and textual transmission. And that by studying the treasure origin accounts of Guru Chowang and Ratna Lingpa, we will be able to trace the development of these themes over time and look at authorship within a visionary context. So I hope that this talk has offered you something new to think about that you haven't encountered before. I have to apologize for being nervous and not being very good at reading my own written work, despite the fact that it's on a computer. I'm really just at the start of my research and my program. So if there are questions, I can't guarantee I'll be able to answer them to your satisfaction. But I'm happy to admit that I don't know the answer if that happens to be the case. If there are any questions. Dion, do you want to be the arbiter here?
Thank you so much, Professor. I'm interested in your presentation. It was really a delight to listen to. A lot of questions, but I'll just do two brief ones. One, I'm curious, when you mentioned there's the spirit protectors for the Dharma site or for the treasure site. I'm curious if there's ever any sort of kind of exposition about their background, like why do they become a protector there? What is their motive? Like, are they kind of, if a practitioner like binds them, do they become like a sort of Dharma practitioner? Yeah, so I don't, maybe you have heard something about that. That was just a curiosity of mine. And then the other question was, is there any sort of exposition about how one becomes a treasure revealer? So those are my two questions. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the talk.
All right, sure. Thank you. So in the case of the first account of Guru Chowang, we're told that some of the protectors are Nagas, and that because they're Nagas, which are these sentient snake-like spirits who protect Dharma. See Nagarjuna for Indian accounts. It tells us that much, but so far in the stuff that I've looked at, it doesn't go into their motive. But because these, I mean, we know from the lifetime of Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, that he deliberately brings spirits who are at first antagonistic to him and kind of resituates them as protectors. But I don't know how clearly we can put that line between the protectors in the modern era and Guru Rinpoche's work 5 centuries previously. In terms of, there's a lot of different environmental spirits, right? We have the Terdak, who in this, I believe he's the one who Guru Chowang has the conversation with him outside of the mansion. But there are also spirits in the land itself that need to be appeased. And there are really, it's really a living environment full of spirits. So as to their motives, if they consider themselves to be the protectors of those teachings, their motive would be to prevent it from falling into the hands of somebody not qualified. And the internal tradition would probably say that's why those people died in the previous attempts, right? Because we saw 2 different attempts to pull out that treasure, and people died, and that made people feel less interested in bringing it forth. So we could read that as their consideration that those potential revealers were not qualified. As to how one becomes a treasure revealer, that's an interesting question. I think one starts by becoming a highly qualified master who has a direct perception of the nature of reality. Right? If one of the texts that they study here at Rangjung Yeshe is the Gateway to Knowledge, and so this mentions the divine eye and the divine ear. And so we can explain it from that perspective, that once you've directly perceived the truth of emptiness, then things which were previously hidden are clearer than they were before. And that's a process that goes on different levels as one makes the journey toward enlightenment. Right. So I believe that the treasure revealers are the ones who not only are able to identify that these treasures are potentially available to be brought forth, but are also willing to undertake the hardships to do so. Guru Chowang and Ratna Lingpa are both a bit more concerned not with how to become a treasure revealer, because they are one, but with people who are false treasure revealers. Right. And so that's a concern that goes on, that obviously it's very easy to say that you've discovered a treasure, write something down and be like, I'm a treasure revealer. And maybe you could get followers that way and pursue some sort of worldly goals. So both of them have descriptions of how to be on the lookout for false tertans and false termas. Oh, it's shameful. It's shameful to pretend to be a treasure revealer if you're not.
What are the signs? Like, what would they say are the signs
of being a false treasure revealer?
Yeah,
you'll have to talk to me after I get further in my research, because it's been a while since I've read that section of the text.
Coming back. Yes, thank you so much for your inspiring talk. I have 2 questions. Just about, what do you call it? The inventory or key? What's the Tibetan term of that? Is this the kachang? Kachang, this one you mean by the code, or like the pin we put into when we take money out of the ATM?
Yeah, like some people are translating it as a treasure inventory. But inventory makes it sound like it's going to be an accounting of everything that's in the treasure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily seem to be, but it does give, I mean, the one that I've looked at so far, the whole one that I've looked at, makes it clear that this is a cave that Guru Rinpoche has practiced in, and gives the kind of the signs of the environment to find it, and says that there'll be sublime teachings within.
Yeah, I was wondering about this kachang, because it's kind of hard to pin down what it is.
It is hard to pin down
Yeah,
what it
so,
is. So when you could look at there's a book called The Arrow and the Spindle, Karme Samten. He talks about the terminology, Karme Samten. So that might be useful. And if I ever finish my research and publish a book, I'll definitely be looking at that. One thing that Guru Chokyi Wangchuk says is that there's 4 different kinds of kajang, and that they can come to you in different ways, right? Because the main thing that draws them all together is that this is going to lead you to the treasure site.
Okay, thank you very much.
For sure.
And one point related to the previous questions, what's the role of prophecies in being treasure revealer? Because in the treasure, when they give the account, like the logio of how the treasure came about in some, they say that the revealers are prophesized. So what type of information is that for you?
Yeah, that's true. I know that there are prophecies which very vaguely allude to potential for future revealers, but I don't know what that text is sourced in. I've definitely heard what you're talking about in empowerment cycles. We get to hear from the prophecy, which prophesizes that treasure revealer. But I myself, that's a question mark for me. That's very interesting. Yeah. Sometimes treasures prophesize future treasure revealers. So previous treasure texts are definitely going to be one source of prophecies, because treasures not only are the object of prophecy, they're also they transmit prophecies of their own. Yeah.
I really appreciate the idea of, I think it was from Ratna Lingpa, expanding the notion of what a treasure is.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you mentioned Rechungpa and this other Sakya master.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if are there any other treasures from other traditions mentioned? And also, second question, wondering if what do you think about considering, for example, Asanga's discovery, I guess you can say, or reception of the 5 Maitreya treatises, and then hiding the Dharma Dharmata Vibhaga and Ratnakotra Vibhaga in the stupa, recovered by Maitripa's treasure also?
Well, I'll take the second one first. That this practice in India only reaffirms, at least for Ratna Lingpa, would reaffirm that that there's an extant tradition of things being hidden and then later revealed. I mean, we looked at the Dharmakaya, but he goes through these, like the Dharmas of Maitreya and so forth. He goes through these texts by the Indian commentators and explains how they too were hidden and revealed. Some of them literally were put aside or put away for a time before being brought forth, and others, at the very least, are inspired from the depths of the teacher's mind to then come forth. Right. So if not by other means, Dharma is always a treasure insofar as that it's held within the teacher's Tuki Sangwa, so the secret essence of the enlightened mind, and then brought forth. Now, whether or not that could map on to modern ideas of creativity is maybe a paper to write sometime down the future, right? But it's certainly interesting. The first part of the question was?
Yeah, just if there's other mention of
other
treasures.
Those are the 2 that I've seen so far. He doesn't go into he's just trying to make a point. So I'm not sure if there's a third one following those 2, but he's making the point that the treasure phenomena exists beyond the boundaries of Nyingma. Because he's very much a person who's in the position of feeling the need to defend Nyingma against detractors. Yeah. So, but it's not a broad accounting of all the treasures outside of the Nyingma school. No.
So this is a small question. Since there is Ratna Lingpa, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any opinion what the term Lingpa really refers to and why it is so popular for Tibetans?
For me, I've always just assumed that Lingpa has to do with a person from a place. For example, our planet is called Zambuling. This is just how the etymology that I've made up in my mind. There are definitely the 11 Lingpas who are treasure revealers. And there are actually more than 11 treasure revealers who use the name Lingpa. But yeah, we have Pema Lingpa, Karma Lingpa, and so on.
And most of them, the majority, right? I mean, at the beginning, I think maybe not so, but the majority of the Tibetans have at least a secondary name with a Lingpa.
It's true. It's true. No, that part of the puzzle is not clear to me. Okay. No, but it is interesting. And I think after a certain point, it becomes de rigueur to be a Lingpa, right, at a certain point. But I'm not sure what that tipping point is, because Guru Chokyi certainly not mentioning himself as a Lingpa, but Ratna Lingpa is taken for given that is one of his names.
Thank you very much for your such wonderful presentation. It's really many things. I think maybe before while I thought about the term is some knowledge wrong, but I want to confirm because at first usually I heard that the old term reveal 25 disciples from Guru Rinpoche. So this point is wrong, right? Yeah, according here.
Yeah, yes and no. Is that the whole question, or is
this is first question?
Okay. Okay, next.
Relate to this question is, so in this two Guru Chokyi and Ratna Lingpa both not belong to this 25 disciple from Guru Rinpoche? This is first question.
So yeah, so this is what's interesting about this research, is that in the case of Ratna Lingpa, he's expanding the definition of treasure far beyond Guru Rinpoche and his 25 disciples. But however, not that much has been said in the academic world about Ratna Lingpa so far, and most of the accounts of descriptions of treasures found on different websites and being referred to are from summaries of the Tibetan tradition written in the 17th century or later. Right. So some of the rhetoric of how we describe the the treasure system has been codified and formulates certain expectations. So it's not wrong, but it's typical that we expect the treasure revealer to be a reincarnation of one of Guru Rinpoche's disciples.
So anyway, both of them are not said they are disciple from Guru Rinpoche. This 25. It's mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I always ignore the hagiographical parts of where they say who they're the reincarnations of. So for all I know, they well might be. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw a hand over here though, so maybe she has the answer.
Guru Chokyi claims to be an incarnation of one of the disciples, and all the Guru Chokyi there he has. Guru Chokyi also had incarnations, including two Guru was identified as a Guru Chokyi.
Oh, what a beautiful connection, especially. Yeah, very nice.
Thank you. Good, thank you. Second question is before I heard you say from Ratna Lingpa say not all from Guru Rinpoche, and it's mean is from any Dhammakaya, this treasure is not always from Guru Rinpoche. It's mean where they come from is can be Dhammakaya from any Buddha or something.
He's not quite making that connection. So in terms of our typical expectation is that there's going to be a Padmasambhava connection, right? But Ratna Lingpa is saying that, in fact, no, this is a tradition even in India. That Dharma texts and objects would be hidden and later revealed. Then the section that I read to you was about how the Dharmakaya, in the way it teaches or presents the Dharma, is also a treasure. But he's not saying that the Dharmakaya is bringing other treasures directly like that. It's more as that I was reading you the first part, and then he'll go into the Sambhogakaya and then the Nirmanakaya, and then he starts going through the historical Buddha Shakyamuni and how his teachings were a treasure, and then the masters of India and how their teachings were a treasure. So in doing so, he starts the implication that the treasure tradition isn't always associated with Padmasambhava, because he's talking about teachers and occurrences which occurred far earlier.
So we can also say it's come from any Buddha, right? Dharmakaya from any Buddha.
Well, within the Dharmakaya, there are no divisions. But what we don't have is treasures that are, this is a treasure directly from the Dharmakaya. Right? What he's saying at the beginning of the text is that the Dharmakaya reveals teachings to its, like, by its own radiant nature at the level of Dharmakaya. He's not saying that the Dharmakaya directly sends treasures. That's not what he's saying.
The third question is now the last treasure discover what I know is from the Ujinjuku's grandfather, right? And after that, are there another treasure revealed? Or nowadays is there some treasure revealed?
If it happened after the 15th century, I'm not taking it into account. Not my business, you know. But if there are meditators who are deeply skilled, then they're able to perceive whether or not there are these treasures which could be revealed. Now, whether or not they elect to reveal them or consider that it's the right time or the right place to reveal them is an entirely different question. So I suspect that the treasure tradition will continue. So you get another one, but I think we also have questions from online. Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly remark that from that perspective, we can also consider the whole of the Mahayana as a dharma, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Ratna Lingpa loves that.
And then my question is, is there any mention about the role of Chodak, of Dharma custodians, Terdak?
Terdak.
Yeah.
Well, the individual that Guru Chokyi was having a conversation with at the gate seems to be the first sign that I've seen. But yeah, that there's guardian spirits who consider it their responsibility to protect a certain treasure in a certain location. This is going to play a big part in the exposition of the tradition as I go through with more detail through Guru Chokyi and Ratna Lingpa's stories.
What about the human receivers and the ones who will make the Dharma expand, the particular Dharma cycle expand?
Oh, do you mean Terdak in
that sense,
as like a Dharma master who's responsible for it?
Preserving the tradition, yeah.
I haven't seen much discussion of that so far. I'm not sure exactly how wide Guru Chokyi's sphere was, but I know that Ratna Lingpa is like a very big deal lama in terms of a large sphere of activities, traveling, empowerment cycles, publishing, printing, on different Dharma cycles which he's bestowing and receiving. Within his, it might be more of an issue of looking at his autobiography, because he gives us a lovely autobiography and he tells us which is very valuable. So he's basically given a year-by-year account of his activities, all in verse. So it'll be something to look for. So I think we have some questions online, perhaps. Can you ask? Oh, so my understanding, what I'm getting from you is that right now you can't transmit those questions to me. Okay, people online, I'm so sorry, but there's a technical difficulty and our situation has some obstacles which prevent you from directly asking the question right now. However, I'm still available. You can definitely reach me and ask me your questions. I suppose I should give you a way to reach me. So maybe contact me at heather.moody@ryi.org. That's my Wangchuk Yeshe email address. And we can take it from there. Yeah. Shall we conclude or? Yes. So it seems like it's time to conclude. Thank you so much for giving your time to listen.